we have a hard time attaching exact probabilities to the different scenarios that we have. Not that we don't have a feel for that, but it's just very difficult to give a firm foundation for that. But what I would like to say is that it is high enough that we actually put it in a report like this, because this is basically a kind of a crisis scenario. And it's not often that we talk about a crisis before it happens. And often we talk about the crisis after it has happened, and then we start analyzing it. So we think that even if it's not the most likely outcome, because our baseline forecast we think is the most likely outcome, it is important enough to start discussing it, especially because it is important for developing countries to start preparing for the negative consequences that come from a serious second round crisis, you can argue, coming from the high income countries. And you have to prepare by that in different areas. You have to prepare for a deterioration in the financial markets by perhaps pre-financing some of the expected financing needs. You have to prepare for a deterioration in your fiscal positions. You have to prepare in terms of your social safety net. So that's about the probability. It is less likely than the baseline scenario, but important enough to think it through. How does it look like? It doesn't look like a normal recession, what we have in the baseline. It really looks like a crisis. When a big country cannot finance anymore its government debt, is basically closed out of financial markets, then you have a situation where you have a sharp contraction in your domestic economy. So in a scenario like that, you should think of a decline in domestic investments of 10 to 15% in one or two big European economies. And that is not unlike what we have seen in many countries in 2009. We're not talking about a normal cycle anymore. We're talking about a crisis. So that's how it would look like. Again, not because we think that is especially likely in the current circumstances, but because we think that it is now important to think through not only somewhat slower growth, but also sharp deteriorations as a prudent measure. What does it mean for Brazil and commodity prices? It doesn't mean for commodity exporters like Brazil more than for other developing countries. In a scenario like that, nobody is spared. Everybody will have to take a sharp decline, a hit of a sharp decline in growth, and everybody has to absorb a sharp deterioration of fiscal positions. And in Brazil, that would come indeed from a decline in commodity prices. And in a scenario like this, for example, for oil prices, we have a further decline of 25%. For metal prices, we also have a further decline of some 30%. And that means for governments like Brazil, a sharp decline in revenues, and you have to be prepared for that. At the same time, we think that for Brazil, what is happening in the domestic economy is at the moment as important as what is coming from the rest of the world. Brazil, for many years now, has pursued very prudent macroeconomic policies. As a result of that, it was very quick to react to the downturn in 2009, to a large extent because it had the space to stimulate the domestic economy through a lot of increase in credit supply. But over the last year, it had to fight the side effects of that increase in credit supply to avoid further increases in asset prices, what you see in many other countries also. To get that stability right is more important for Brazil probably than what is coming from the outside economy.
Okay, I'd like to respond to the question about China. Since the question is raised in Chinese, so please allow me to respond in Chinese. 这个关于如果世界经济它的增长放缓，那当然呢，对中国来讲会有一定的影响。 因为呢，中国是世界经济体系当中的一员，尤其呢，这个对外的出口贸易对中国经济是相当重要的一块。不过呢，中国政府反周期干预的空间是比较大的。那么，中国政府的财政赤字，按照官方的，在25%左右，是 GDP 的25%左右。那这个在全世界呢，算是呢政府的积累的负债最低的国家之一。那么当然呢，现在有一些学者，国外学者，他把地方政府的融资平台的贷款也当作政府的负债，但就是加上那一块，也不过就是45%左右。那45%的积累的公共负债在全世界也是算最低的。那么这也就是说，如果有必要的话，中国政府还是有相当大的财政空间，可以呢做反周期的刺激。再加上中国还是一个中等发达国家，那么产业升级基础设施环境、社会工程的改善的空间也很大。所以呢，不仅是说有财政的空间可以作为反周期的干预，那么好的项目还会非常多。这样讲起来的话，中国在今年、明年在未来一段时间呢，保持一个比较稳定的高速的增长，这完全是有可能的。Now I'd like to respond to Bob's question from the Dow Jones. That now the growth rate, according to our forecast, in 2012, is likely to be 8.4, and 2013 is likely to be 8.3. Certainly, it's lower than 9.1 in 2011 and about 10 in the other years. But I think 8.4, 8.3 are still quite high. And it's closer to the target growth rate of the Chinese government. And because, to maintain an 9% will contribute to the income, the job domestically, but if higher than that, certainly will put a pressure on the overheating, on the inflation. And the Chinese government would like to, contain the overheating and inflation. So, to bring down the growth rate down to around 8%, that would be, the desirable range for the Chinese government. But if Chinese growth rate can maintain at 8% or a little bit above, certainly it's also a good news for the world because it will support the import from other countries, including capital goods and commodity goods. So that will also provide support to the commodity market and the growth in other countries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, why don't we take your question first, and then you first.
I'm from Caixin. You just mentioned about the most important problems in 2012, maybe still in the Eurozone, and also the emerging market may also be in trouble. How about the U.S. economy?
好，我是来自上海证券报的记者。我想请问，你们对今年国际上的跨境资金的流动有没有什么预测？因为去年流入发展中国家的这个资金是大幅度的减少的，那今年流入发展中国家的资金会不会也是比去年延续去年的态势，继续呈现减少的态势？
Thank you, Lucy. Excuse me. Lucy Harvey from Reuters. Currently in China, we're seeing a very sharp slowdown in the real estate sector. which combines with the trade slowdown that you are warning about and the financial flows, potential financial flows slowdown. Do you think that China would be able to sustain on all three fronts, or will China have to relax its real estate curbs and allow that sector of the economy to gallop forward again? Thank you.
Okay, Hans, you want to start? The first one is about U.S. economy.
And then the capital flows.
And the capital flow.
So first on the capital flows, as I said already in the second half of 2011, we saw a sharp decline. That means that for 2012, as a year as a whole, we expect also lower capital flows than in 2011. That's partly the carryover from that second half of 2011. Then we expect a slight rebound in 2013, but as percent of GDP, it will still be very moderate. So in 2003, for the capital flow to the developing countries, we expect 3.3% of their GDP coming in the form of capital flows, 3.7% of their GDP in 2013, but that compares with, for example, 8% of their GDP in 2007, just before the crisis. It compares to, on average, 5% of the last 10 years. So we expect both for 2012 and 2013 relatively modest capital flows going into the developing world, very much the consequence of the subdued situation in the financial markets coming from the problems in the high-income countries. Then on the U.S., you will find the forecast numbers in the report for the U.S., but two observations there. First of all, we haven't seen a sharp negative reaction in the last couple of months of the European slowdown and the financial problems on the U.S. economy. On the contrary, the economic news has been positive in terms of a slight acceleration of industrial production, improved private sector job creation. But that comes after an unexpectedly weak first part of the year. So that means that overall growth numbers for 2011 and also for 2012 are now lower than we and many others expected half a year ago. And those low growth numbers are an illustration that the story that we have been telling since 2009, that this will be a very slow recovery and that it will take many, many years before the damage done by the Great Recession and the damage done by the imbalances created in the boom period before that recession are undone. It will take many years, and it will also take many years to reduce unemployment. And that is where the problems in the high-income countries are coming from at the moment. This is not just a normal cyclical story that we are observing. This is a story of structural problems in almost all high-income countries, in Europe, in the United States, and you can argue in Japan also, with too low growth to create full employment, with a negative spillover on the rest of the world, and it requires structural solutions, not cyclical solutions, to get out of this situation. So in short, the last couple of months have been positive. The U.S. has not been directly infected by what is happening in Europe, but that doesn't mean that the situation is without problems.
Well, Aldo, would you like to respond to the question regarding the property market and whether China can respond to these triple pressures?
Okay, the property sector